Hello and greetings from UB. On behalf of the Office of Alumni Engagement and the UB School of Management, we are delighted you are able to join us for today's webinar presentation. My name is Christy Fields and I'm the Director of Alumni Lifelong Engagement here at UB. I'm also joined by my wonderful colleague, Joy Rona. We are both so grateful you are able to join us today and hope you and your family are staying well. Since 1923, the UB School of Management has been developing leaders and making an impact on individuals, businesses, and communities around the world. In their mission to define the future of management, Dean Iyer has unified the school around 4 distinct areas of focus: business analytics, social impact of management, business of climate change, innovation, entrepreneurship, and leadership. Each of these initiatives are helping to realize their vision of a world of transformational leaders and organizations who change society for the better. With that said, we are excited to welcome today's featured presenter, Dr. Brandon Szerwo. Brandon is an assistant professor of accounting in the UB School of Management. He joined the school in 2017 after completing his PhD in accounting at the University of Washington in Seattle. Prior to his PhD studies, Brandon worked as an external auditor with Deloitte Touche LLP for 8 years. Brandon's research focuses on audit quality, governance, and disclosure. In today's session, Brandon will look at auditing as an example of a human capital intensive industry to see how looking for risks and opportunities through an ERM lens can provide valuable insights to improve businesses. We will leave some time during today's webinar for Q&A. If you happen to have any questions during the presentation, you're going to see a question box on your GoToWebinar control panel. Just submit those to us at any time and we will save them for the Q&A. In addition, we will be recording today's session and we'll send you all a copy within the next 24 hours. And now it's my pleasure to turn it over to our featured presenter, Dr. Brandon Szerwo. Welcome, Brandon.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. It's nice to be here. I'm excited to talk to you about the benefits of DEI reporting. So let's go ahead and dive into it. So kind of talks about my background real quick. DEI reporting kind of fits into some of my research. As was mentioned, I focus on audit quality and financial reporting quality, but one of the new focuses within that is sort of this emphasis on auditor human capital. So I'm going to be talking a little bit more broadly than just auditing for this, although we will use some auditing examples, but we'll kind of see some human capital in action here and hopefully enjoy the webinar. So let's dive into it. Here's what we're going to try and cover. What is DEI reporting and how does it relate to ESG reporting? So real quick, DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion reporting, and how does it relate to ESG, or environmental, social, and governance reporting? How are they related? What is ERM, enterprise risk management, and why is that important here? And then how do companies benefit from DEI reporting? And I will say real quick that there can be a lot of benefits to DEI reporting. My talk is going to focus mostly on benefits to the companies themselves, so our operational benefits, profitability benefits, but there are greater societal benefits to DEI reporting. Things like decreasing income inequality and promoting inclusion, promoting equity across many diverse community forces here. What's often nice about that, though, is you can accomplish both at once, sort of these societal improvements and improvements to a business's bottom line. And we'll talk about that a little bit too here. But the focus will primarily be on businesses and sort of the benefits of DEI reporting to them. And then we'll talk about some examples and show some insights from DEI reporting. So what is DEI reporting? Well, again, it's diversity, equity, and inclusion. And what we're talking about is reporting on the workforce itself, reporting on human capital workforce, specifically with emphasis on diversity, equity, and inclusion type metrics. So we might be talking about race, we might be talking about gender, we might be talking about disability status, things like that. We're going to be reporting on different characteristics of the workforce in that sort of lens. And beyond just reporting on the workforce itself, this reporting might also include disclosure of like goals or aspirations that are related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So that's kind of the reporting we're talking about. This can be internal or external. So if it's internal, right, the company will keep it internal to itself and use it to inform its own decisions, hopefully. If it's external, it would put it up on its website or more broadly available to the public. Even if you're doing external reporting, hopefully management is still making use of that information that underlies it and improving their business decisions with that. So internal or external, either one. And then it is unregulated. Generally, if you're a big enough company, there is some reporting requirements to the federal government, but we're going to be talking a little bit more about beyond that, more of this unregulated space there. We've seen DEI reporting kind of explode in popularity over the last few years. I'm assuming most of you have kind of heard at least a little bit about it, maybe not too familiar with exactly what it is or what some of the benefits are, obviously, but it has grown in popularity. So as we see here, this is from Just Capital. They're a firm that kind of focuses in some of these areas, a research firm, and one of the things they do look at is this growth in DEI reporting. So as you see here, right, it's just talking about the Russell 1000 companies that they've tracked, so the biggest 1,000 publicly traded companies out there in the United States. What they're looking for is they're looking for disclosures about our workforce's demographics by race, ethnicity, gender, sort of these the same characteristics, I should say, that go in this EEO-1 report, which is that required report to the federal government for companies over a certain size. So what they're calling is sort of the gold standard. And they're saying, hey, if you not necessarily the EEO-1 report, but something analogous to it being reported, we're seeing that's being reported in 34% of these Russell 1000 companies as of 2022. So about 340 companies out of the 1,000. And that's up from just 11% the year before. And in 2019, it was only 3%. So in the span of 2019 to 2022, it's gone from 3% to 34%, right? So over a 10-fold increase. And I think that momentum is continuing to this day, right? We're going to see even bigger numbers when we look at 2023 reporting there. I will say they call that EEO-1 level of data sort of the gold standard. I think companies can do better than that, and we'll see some examples of companies doing better than that, but that's what they sort of considered like a top level designation. And of those 34%, right, excuse me, of the those Russell 1000 companies, 34% are doing that core, what they call, again, the gold standard, but that doesn't mean the other 64% are disclosing nothing. Rather, what we see is only 28% of these companies aren't disclosing anything. We see another 16% doing some level of disclosure and 22% doing a little bit more than that, with about 34% doing sort of, again, a top level there. So overall, only about 28% of companies aren't putting out some sort of disclosure on the composition of their workforce through some sort of a DEI type lens. And this is as of September 2022. Here's an example, right? So as we get further into this, maybe it'd be helpful to look at an example here. So this is from Starbucks, their 2022 report here. And I want to, this is a really good report in my opinion for a couple different reasons. We see at the top there's sort of those three broad categories: retail sales on the left, corporate roles in the middle, so your HQ type roles, and then manufacturing there on the right. And within this, they then break down their workforce according to a couple of different important DEI type categories, right? So we see gender and we see race. So we got BIPOC on one column, we got women in another column. Across these different functions of the company, and then within that, you see the breakdown within job role. So for example here, we look at barista on the bottom left there, we can see that 73% of Starbucks baristas are women. And that's helpful to know in and of itself, but something a little bit more helpful to know is to compare that to, well, what does retail leadership look like? And we see 65% of retail leadership, at least in terms of vice presidents, are women as well. So that's a pretty good match there, right? We're seeing the leadership generally doing a pretty good job on gender of representing the underlying workforce. You compare that to the race, right, with the BIPOC description there, and you see that the performance isn't nearly as good though, right? 50% in the workforce versus 20% at the regional vice president level. So kind of points out Starbucks has some work to do there. And then, we get these other categories down to the bottom right there. We also see the kind of the gender, the composition of the board of directors on these different DEI measures. So an example of a pretty good report, I'd say. Here we can look at Deloitte, where I used to work. Deloitte's not a publicly traded company. It is a partnership. So this is specifically looking at their 2022 PPMD composition. That stands for partners, principals, and managing directors. So the top two lines kind of compare 2021 to 2022 as of a point in time. So this is, in research, we call this a levels analysis. So you can see the composition in terms of ethnicity. You can see it in terms of gender. As of that point in time, you can see how it changed. And then the bottom two lines, look at the new class, like those that were just promoted to partner, principal, or managing director during the year. So you can see how it's sort of changing as well. So again, some really good data. So not just a levels analysis, but also a changes analysis. And this is helpful to people who would consume Deloitte's products, people who interact with Deloitte, potential workers, or if this is a publicly traded company, you could say it's important to investors as well, as they want to kind of understand the companies that they're potentially investing in. So a couple of examples of some good DEI reporting there. So how does this relate to ESG reporting? So again, ESG is environmental, social, and governance reporting. Well, this sort of gets at the S there, that social pillar there. So we have a couple different definitions here of what social sort of reports on. So the first is from Deloitte there. It says under the social pillar, companies report how they manage their employee development and labor practices. So something fairly focused on human capital of the organization itself. And that second quote there from McKinsey Consulting says social kind of addresses the social impact and associated risks from societal actions, employees, customers, and communities where it operates. So DEI reporting, I would say, fits in that social category, although the social category is broader than just workforce or human capital there. So that's how those relate. For example, or the Starbucks report actually was kind of from their ESG report, so that the Starbucks DEI numbers there actually came from the ESG report there. Okay, so now kind of got a baseline set. Why is DEI reporting? This is going to be the kind of the main themes that underlie the message here, underlie the webinar. So why is it reporting? Well, we see that DEI reporting is reporting on the workforce. It's reporting on a company's human capital. So you're getting this extra information being created and reported on that's specific to human capital. And if we look at that second bullet point here, we see from McKinsey this quote that the most important resource in any economy or organization, a company or a business in that case, is its human capital, the collective knowledge, attributes, skills, and experience and health of the workforce. So what we're seeing here is we're seeing reporting, increased reporting, as we saw from a couple of slides ago, how much this has grown in prevalence, increased reporting in a company's most important asset, which is quite frankly helpful in a lot of cases, right? We want to kind of know what's going on with a company's most important assets. So we can combine that with this quote over here from Peter Drucker: what gets measured gets managed. Right? So if we're not measuring our human capital, we're not measuring our most important resource, we might be missing opportunities to more effectively manage it, missing opportunities to improve the bottom line of the business, improve operations, to make employees happier, to help retain them, to find out what's important to them. It's sort of a win-win situation, hopefully, win for the employees and win for the company itself. So what gets measured gets managed. And so the quote kind of continues on, what gets measured gets managed, even when it's pointless to manage it, and even when it harms the purpose of the organization to do so. So what that's saying is, hey, don't spend too much time measuring things that aren't important. Instead, let's increase our measurement. Kind of the implication is, let's increase our measurement of things that are important, such as human capital, our most important asset. So how can reporting, in this case, external reporting, benefit human capital? There's a couple different ways this can be helpful. Information, this reporting, I should say, has an informational, right? It provides new information that people possibly didn't know before. It could be to internal uses, right? Management might not have known this, external usages. investors, customers might not know this, so they're getting new information that they can make decisions with. And then it also has a detection role. We didn't know there was a problem before because we didn't measure it, right? We didn't, going back to the Starbucks example, maybe they didn't know they had the large discrepancy in the racial composition of its workforces when you looked at baristas versus management. You might be able to eyeball that sometimes, but you may not realize the extent of the problem until you actually measure it. And so you have to do the measuring to reporting. So there's this information role, a detection role, and if you do decide to report externally, there is a transparency effect there as well. And this comes from the fact that when somebody is monitored, right, when somebody is observed, they tend to change their behavior. So you're sort of holding yourself out there to these standards that you're kind of creating, and you're opening yourself up to being monitored. So think of this as do you drive a little bit differently if you know there's a police officer nearby or kind of behind you, right? You probably drive a little bit more cautiously. And it's the same sort of thing. Once you put information out there, you're being transparent, you're sort of holding yourself to what you say and to what's being reported there. And then again, just forces companies to measure a major asset, human capital being that major asset, and all gets back to what gets measured gets managed. So here's a quick analogous situation here. We had ICFR reporting start in 2004. So in early 2000s, late 1990s, we had all these accounting scandals, Enron, WorldCom, Tyco, and that led to the Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002. One of the requirements it did is it required companies of a certain size to report on their internal controls over financial reporting and to get those audited. Now, those did a lot of great things for financial reporting qualities. If we look at restatements, which are a sign of bad financial reporting quality, those have gone down monotonically, nearly steadily, very steadily since 2006. So Sarbanes-Oxley, including this requirement, now it did a lot of other things too, but this one requirement contributed to that, greatly improved financial reporting. But it had other benefits, and that's sort of what we're getting at here. So if we look down at the second bullet point there, this is a study from Guh, Koester, and McVeigh, and they find that, foregoing these internal control audits, so if you miss these internal control audits, or you don't do them, I should say, cost companies about $1.7 million in future earnings and about $2.2 million in their market cap from failure to detect and remediate deficient internal controls. Now, the crux of this is, right, because they're relying on bad information. So not only did internal controls improve and your financial reporting quality improve, but because of that, companies were being forced to essentially increase the quality of their information. And when these companies started having better information, higher quality information, they started making better business decisions, which resulted in higher earnings. So that's, again, analogous to what we're seeing here. Hopefully, this DEI reporting, again, is just sort of blowing up, right? It's becoming more and more popular, but I do expect that we are going to get benefits from this in terms of future earnings and values of these different companies. So getting these operational benefits from DEI reporting. Now this one's kind of the, I don't know, the obvious check here. So to get these benefits, right, you got to collect the data, you got to analyze the data, and you got to use it to inform your business decisions. And when you do this, you can get greater insights to what's going on and make better decisions here. But that's not always the case. So we look over here in the box, right? This is from the UK. It's from their Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development. They did a survey here, and they find that, it says here at the top, even as UK companies acknowledge that they struggle with hiring and retaining employees, the study shows that many organizations are not collecting the people data that would help. So we go scroll down a little bit down there. They found that only 47% of the companies are collecting data on this topic. So over half the companies saying, hey, we got these problems here, but they're not collecting any data that might kind of help them with that. So not the best business decision there to say how you can fix the problem. And then kind of the odd piece here is, and of those 47%, right, only half of those, or about 26% overall, actually do something with the data. So about half those 47% aren't actually doing anything. They collect the surveys and they kind of throw them in the drawer and they collect dust and nothing happens, right? So obviously not a good way to improve things. So you got to collect the data, analyze it, and use it to inform your business decisions. And we'll talk about that a little bit more here in a second, but as a quick recap, human capital is very important. It's the #1 asset in a lot of cases. DEI reporting can provide some advantages, forced data collection and analysis, got this information rules, detection rules, observation rule of information here. Collecting the data and analyzing it's not sufficient though. You got to actually go to that next step and use it to make better business decisions. We've seen an analogous situation there with the ICFR reporting, the internal controls of financial reporting, but it's that using it to make better business decisions that's key here. Systematic approach is preferable, and enterprise risk management can help this approach, right? It's that ERM, enterprise risk management, provides the systematic approach. So real quick, what is ERM? Quick synopsis, right? It's put out there by the Committee of Sponsoring Organizations, COSO. And it talks about the culture, capabilities, practices that are integrated with strategy setting and performance, all with the hope of creating, preserving, and realizing value. So it's sort of the systematic approach to realize value. And as it says here in the second bullet point, right? It's this framework. It goes from like objectives to risks to performance analysis and culture to governance and reporting, it all with the goal of enhancing value. So here's kind of the breakdown of it, one of their charts they put out there. And this is, you know, obviously a little much for us to cover here. You could do an entire course on this, let alone a webinar, but an entire, like, you know, college course on just ERM practices. But here's kind of the quick show of that, and I'll show you kind of how this breaks down into this here as well, right? So we're going to try and formulate business objectives. So if you look down there at number 9 under the blue in the graph, right? One of the things is sort of after you sort of set this foundation level in your company, let's take a look at formulating business objectives. So basically, what are we trying to achieve? Now, this will take you all the way from the very top of the company. Right? What's our strategic mission? What's our strategic objectives at the very high level of the company, right? Sort of the CEO and the board and owner of the company type of level, all the way down to individual business processes, right? So what are we trying to achieve when we do a bank reconciliation? Or what are we trying to achieve when we greet customers? So all the way from the very top down to those individual business processes, think about what are we trying to achieve? What's the objective there? Then we're going to look at risk management. So this is sort of the green performance there. If you're looking at the chart, we're going to try and identify risks. We're going to try and assess those risks, prioritize them, and then implement responses. So we got to identify all the different risks. This comes from management expertise to know sort of what these different risks are, but it can be informed by DEI reporting in our example here. You got to assess those risks. So once you've identified them, you say, okay, well, how likely are they to occur? What's the impact, potential impact are of them? And you prioritize the ones that are more likely to occur or that have a bigger potential impact there. And you prioritize your responses to those, and then you implement responses. So thinking about this with the human capital component, right? You might have risks to human capital itself, like, hey, we're doing something that kind of our employees don't like, and it's causing them to leave, or it's causing employee morale to be down, right? And so then you're not sort of, you're sort of getting a workforce that's unmotivated and it doesn't want to give it their all in those cases, or maybe it's even leaving the company, right? So there's those types of risks. But there's also, you can use human capital and use your understanding through DEI reporting to also know where human capital is sort of the response to a potential risk. So if you're Google or something like that, where human capital drives what you do, right? Are you going to be the next inventor of this product or that product or this service? Knowing how to kind of, knowing that human capital is going to be key to that response is another way of sort of how human capital and enterprise risk management do go hand in hand together here. Then you're going to pursue the improvements here, right? You're going to make those decisions. And this is number 17 down there in purple. You're going to use your understanding of human capital, right? So once you start measuring human capital, you can use it to improve your business decisions. And that's sort of the, you know, kind of going back to, well, how do you actually fold this in here? You're going to have more information on your human capital. You're going to have more information on gender composition, racial composition. And beyond that, though, you're going to have broader information on, does my workforce, is it being properly managed? Do I have too many managers, not enough managers? Does this site have too much? Does this site have too little? All this different information comes about from gathering increased data on your human capital, right? Your workforce, that is. And again, this can also go hand in hand with pursuing broader social objectives at the same time. So let's take a look at some examples from the audit industry. So this is sort of diving into some of my research on this area. And why this is interesting, I think, or why this is a good industry to focus on is a better way to say that, is because a couple of these key characteristics that the audit industry has. It's number one is it's highly dependent upon human capital. Auditing is a service, right? You go in there, you take a look at a company's books and records, you make recommendations, you find problems. It's all this big service, and it's very dependent upon human capital. Expertise in accounting and auditing is necessary. And so again, human capital is very important. The other interesting characteristic is that the service is very similar across the providers, right? So every publicly traded company has to get an external audit, and they have to file with the SEC their external audit report when they put together the financial statements. And so the service is very similar. Kind of adds to, we're able to kind of peel apart some different things going on in the industry because the underlying product is pretty much the same. Those providers there. And so this ability to look at this is new. Our ability to kind of understand this and to break this down is because we recently got new data, right? So kind of see how we got more data. Now we're able to understand more. And this is just within the last couple of years here where we're getting this data. So before, me as an external person, right, an external researcher, all the data I use here is external. I'm not working with any particular audit company or firm or anything like that to get internal data. All this is available publicly. So we're seeing this ability to collect online data. Things like from Indeed.com, LinkedIn, Facebook, stuff like that, where people are posting about their jobs, right? So you can think about, workforce social media sites. Where you're posting where you work, where you're posting what your job title is, when you started, when you left, what your background is in terms of where your education's from and things like that. So people are posting this information online and other groups are able to collect it. And so with that, we are now able to kind of put together some enhanced research on this to answer questions that we couldn't answer before. Now, maybe the companies themselves, right, these audit firms are collecting some of this data. Maybe they're not. It's hard to say. For example, their DEI reporting is new, like we saw with the Russell 1000 companies there. This data hasn't been reported at this level by the firms for all that long, like 2018, 2019, somewhere around there. So this is new. But our data goes back further than that. And so we're able to come up with some interesting insights that kind of show the power of DEI reporting, because that's, again, what a lot of firms are putting out there. So here's kind of an example of something that we find from this. And this is, again, from our research. This is with Josh Cavas as well, me and Josh Cavas, that is. And what we're doing here is we're looking at the percentage of an audit office's workforce that is female, right? So we're taking percentage of the workers, what percent are men versus what percent are female, and we're seeing how that relates to audit quality. So again, kind of something very DEI focused here. And what we find is that as the percentage of your audit workforce becomes increasingly female, that's associated with fewer misstatements. So again, misstatements are bad. So what this is showing is as the office becomes increasingly female, there's actually being associated with higher audit quality, which is something we didn't know until recently, which I think is kind of interesting. And then we can break that down further, right? The greater the disaggregation of the data, the better the insights you can make are. So when we break this down into columns 2 through 5 there, we look at managers versus non-managers. We see that this effect is only present with non-managers, which is something kind of interesting, something I don't think a lot of people knew and a lot of people didn't expect. So as your staff, right, those first few years out of your university, right, so kind of those first 5 years, staff and seniors, as that percentage of the workforce is increasingly female, you're seeing again it associated with higher audit quality. But when you look at the manager roles, there's no association there. It's sort of measured by the stars. So 3 stars, I should say, is kind of the highest level of statistical significance. 2 stars is also really good. 1 star is sort of the marginal significance there. So just different ways to run it, different controls and things like that in columns 2 through 5. All right, so now what we're saying, now we can use this to break this down a little bit further. We can say, well, maybe women are associated with higher audit quality because they spend more time on it and their audits are less efficient. Or maybe they're not only really good at audit quality, but women have a greater association with efficiency at the same time. So let's look at that too. So that's what we do with these different dependent variables here. So we look at audit fees in column 1. We look at this earnings announcement lag. So how long does it take you as an auditor to let the company issue its 4th quarter earnings announcement? How long does it take you to issue the audit report as measured there in column 3? And how long or what percentage of filings are late? So the SEC has certain requirements for when you file, what percentage those are late. So what we find here is that not only are female non-managers associated with higher quality, but they're also associated with more efficient audits as across all 4 of these different measures here. So kind of, again, I think it's interesting. I think it's kind of a powerful insight there to know this. And here's another way we kind of break it down. So now we say, well, is it that women are associated with higher audit quality? Or is it that when you get these more diverse teams, what happens there? Is this diverse? It's the effects of sort of these inherent behaviors and traits that are more prevalent in women than men? Or is it the fact that we have greater diversity, gender diversity specifically is what I mean there on these different teams? And we find out that it's, when looking at this chart here, we find out that it's actually these behaviors and traits that tend to be more concentrated in women. That's what's sort of driving this relationship with higher audit quality. So how does this kind of come together to show the benefits of DEI reporting? Well, we collected the data, right? It's kind of the first step there. Analyze the data, and then you have to use it to inform your business decisions. So just another piece of background information here, auditing has a very high turnover rate between 2010 and 2018. So that's the period that we studied in that in those different regressions that you saw there. Turnover was above 20% generally. And when you look at staff, the people that are actually associated with this higher quality of audits, it was about 30% turnover annually. So again, 3 out of 10 employees are leaving every year. So auditing does have a very high turnover rate. So now we're going to want to use this to inform business decisions. Now that we've collected the data, analyzed it, and we kind of have a little bit more background information, we can ask some tough questions. Well, why does the effect disappear at the manager level, right? If you're running these organizations, that'd be a key question to ask. And it'd be a key question to get to know the answer for. And answering that question is what's going to help you drive increased profitability. It's going to help you drive improved customer satisfaction. And it'll probably help you drive a happier and more successful workforce. And so we've sort of broken this down, and there's 3 possible reasons that we can think of. There could possibly be more, and we don't know the answer to this yet, right? It could be isomorphic processes at the firm. So basically, the firms have internal controls in place that sort of kick in a little bit harder at the manager level and above, such that the controls are so tight at the manager level that there's just very little differentiation between people at that level. It could be because the best are leaving, right? We could see that those individuals, those women that are really responsible for this increased audit quality, are possibly leaving the firms at higher rates. So we're sort of losing our best talent. Now, if that's the case, that'd be a very important thing to understand, to address, and to fix. Or it could be assimilation and leadership roles. And what this is, and prior research has found this, is that the gender differences, the behaviors and differences in traits and behaviors, as people go up the leadership ranks, tend to disappear. So people are acting more similar, like both men and women are acting more similarly at those levels. So maybe that's the different cause. We don't know. You know, Josh and I haven't researched that yet. We don't know that yet. but it being a very important question, that's the type of question, that's an example of a type of question that you would want to answer and where you can use this data to really improve your results. So here we can see something from Ernst & Young's 2022 DEI report. Now, Ernst & Young is one of the other big four accounting firms. They do a lot of audits. And you can see this from their report where they say, hey, being a leader and driving actionable change among our people and our clients in our communities requires regular self-examination and desire to learn and improve, right? So they're saying, hey, we're gonna collect this data, we're gonna analyze this data, and we're gonna try and be better from it, right? We're gonna not just collect it and analyze it, but we're gonna try and actually change. We're gonna hold ourselves to a higher level here and improve. So it says here, we've seen progress over the last year on several metrics, including representation of women and racially and ethnically diverse partners and principals, but we've also lost ground in some other metrics. And this all comes from their diversity, equity, and inclusion report. So again, sort of the benefits of transparency here. They can't hide from their data, right? They know that they have external pressures to kind of say, hey, you told us you were gonna get better. You say this is a goal. You're not getting better, what's going on? Or kudos to you, you are getting better. So kind of seeing this all wrapped up there, which I think is kind of neat. Another example of some research we're doing is this turnover and audit quality. Now, this is also with Professor Josh Gavis as well. And when we look at turnover and audit quality, and what we see here, again, so turnover is your employees leaving the firms. So as turnover increases, your audit quality goes down. So as turnover increases, you're having more misstatements or more restatements. You're having higher absolute discretionary accruals, which is sort of an academic measure of audit quality. So a higher measure there is a bad thing. And then we're seeing less instances of going concern opinions. So these are sort of warnings from the auditor to financially distressed companies, or warnings from the auditor of financially distressed companies to their investors and other financial statements users. So we're seeing less warnings come out when there's financial distresses. So in all three measures, what we're seeing here is as employee turnover, right, as people are leaving the firms, that's we can't say it's causal, but we are seeing this association here with worse financial reporting. So it kind of comes from, again, understanding your human capital, knowing that this relation exists between turnover and audit quality. And moreover than that, we're also seeing that it harms the relationship with your customers. So as turnover increases, you're charging your clients higher fees. Generally, clients don't like that. You're seeing the earnings announcement lag go down. Now that could be a good thing or it could be a bad thing, but when you kind of combine it with these measures 2, 3, and 4 here, how I interpret this is the auditors are sort of losing negotiating power with their clients. So clients are getting away with things that they wouldn't get away with otherwise if they had less turnover. And then ultimately, we're seeing the complete collapse of this relationship with your clients as measured there by column 4, auditor switches. So that means you have a new auditor, or the client has a new auditor next year and you have no more relationship with them, right? So the relationship ends. Generally, auditors don't want that to happen because they like the fees, right? They like providing their service there. So turnover is associated with worsening of the client relationship. And we can break this down a little bit further. We figure out, well, why is this relationship breaking down? So in column 2 here, we have dismissals. In column 3 here, we have resignations. So column 2, dismissals, this means the client sort of dismisses the auditor. Basically, it's the client's decision to walk away from the relationship. And so what we see here is, if we look at column 2, where turnover, we see there's no stars. But we do see in the third one there, turnover times low audit comp, we see the 3 stars there. And what this is telling us is that clients don't necessarily mind the turnover in and of itself, although it's close to statistical significance. But what really causes them to leave is when turnover is combined with poor audit quality. When that happens, clients are much more likely to leave. Contrast that to resign. So this is in the case where the auditor says, you know what, we can no longer service the client, we're walking away. So the auditor walks away in that case. And here what we see is turnover is associated with just this need to walk away from some relationship. So the situation here could be as dire as, hey, you know what, we just lost too many people. We don't have a sufficient workforce to maintain this client relationship. So we have to get rid of the client, right? And you've probably seen some of this with the pandemic, not in the audit industry necessarily, but right, you've seen restaurants cut back on hours because they say, hey, we just don't have the staff to be open as late as or as long as we want to. So, you know, kind of an analogous situation there. So again, all this is coming from reporting on your human capital. This one's not as focused on DEI reporting in of itself as the gender measure was, but we are seeing this as an example of another sort of side benefit to measuring your human capital as you gain insights not into only DEI, but into broader human capital concerns and measures here. So kind of continuing with our turnover here, when we break it down by managers versus non-managers, again, we see that non-managers are driving this association with audit quality. So again, this is the group that kind of turns over about 30% per year. And I know regulators are concerned about this. So as, again, if you're using this DEI, this human capital reporting to make better decisions, you can now sort of quantify how big of a problem this is in terms of audit quality and ultimately the auditor-client relationship. When we look at the auditor-client relationship in columns 4, 5, 6, and 7 there, we see the relationship or the relation is generally with manager turnover. This kind of makes sense because managers are generally considered to be in charge of client relationships. And so when managers turn over, they tend to have the greater impact on the auditor-client relationship. And then in column 7 there, we see that both managers and non-managers are pretty important for that relationship in terms of actually causing clients to leave or needing to step away from the audit yourself. So the switching of the auditors, that is. So again, another example here, right? We collected the data, we analyzed the data, and we got data, and we need to have the data inform these different decisions there. So here's some more. We can see kind of turnover levels in that panel A data there from Big 4 versus non-Big 4. You can see that between 2009 and 2018, turnover has generally increased, so the problem's getting worse. And you can start, again, trying to piece together more information here. So in this other box down there at the bottom, you can see starting annual salaries by year, and you look at data science, tech, and accounting, right? So auditing and accounting go hand in hand. So we're seeing some headwinds, we're seeing some problems there. Well, how are you going to retain, if you can't retain people, what are you going to do if you can't attract them in the first place? And we're seeing that as well. We're seeing accounting salaries aren't rising at the same rate as data science and tech salaries are. So again, use this information that you've collected and analyzed in your human capital, incorporate it into your business decisions, understand what you're trying to achieve, right? Going back to the enterprise risk management, what are we trying to achieve? Well, one big thing we're trying to achieve, one objective we have is probably quality audits. We don't want to put a bad audit out there. We'd rather have high audit quality. Well, what's the risk? Well, the risk is our turnover is really high, and we now know that turnover is pretty important to audit quality. So what's your risk response? Your risk response might be, hey, we got to start paying our employees a little bit more, or doing other things. It doesn't have to always be about pay, doing other things to help retain our audit staff, retain our audit managers, such that we can kind of drive down the poor audit quality, drive down turnover, and hopefully increase audit quality. So kind of an example, a couple of examples there from my research that kind of really informed some of my thinking on this, and I think are good examples to seeing how this reporting on your human capital can improve operations, has the potential to improve operations. So the first one with gender and audit quality was very DEI focused, right? Measuring specifically gender composition of an audit workforce and its associations with audit quality and audit efficiency. And here in this turnover one, something not necessarily specific to DEI, but it is sort of a benefit to having greater reporting, data collection on your workforce as a whole. And you can see as if you're putting this data out there, especially on turnover, if you're putting turnover data out there publicly, how you're going to face even increased pressure to get it right, because your clients are going to say, hey, how come turnover is so high? I know that leads to bad audit quality. I don't want a bad quality audit, so fix your turnover. the regulators coming by and saying, hey, why is your turnover so high? We know that this is an audit quality indicator. You need to fix that because we want to make sure you are producing high quality audits. Again, hopefully a couple examples I find interesting. So a couple of points of caution here before we wrap up. Data collection can be expensive, right? It's not costless to collect this data. It becomes more and more costly. And if you're, a small business, you don't necessarily need to collect this data to kind of know what's going on with your human capital. But as businesses grow, it can be imperative to sort of gain an understanding of what's going on with your human capital, if you can't just look around your different office or your warehouse or whatever it might be and sort of get an understanding of that. Again, so as companies grow, data collection becomes more necessary, probably becomes more expensive though, because you just don't have the ability to kind of know exactly what's going on just from observation and so on. So the other thing is transparency can have some negative consequences, right? You could reveal proprietary information that your competitors could use. In which case you have to kind of weigh that, especially if you're doing external reporting. If you're doing internal reporting, that's less of a concern though. Also with transparency, failure to meet expectations can be painful, right? So you say you have this goal, you don't reach it, right? That means whoever the other constituent is that you're sort of working with or that you're allowing yourself to be monitored by sort of knows you didn't meet that goal. So again, failure to meet expectations can be painful, I guess is one way to say it. And then what do you do if your social objectives don't align with your business objectives? Again, I think there's a lot of overlap there, so I don't think this is a major concern, but it'd be something that you'd want to evaluate. And again, hopefully you're pursuing objectives where the business is going to win, society as a whole is going to win, and like your human capital or your employees are going to win at the same time as well. But a couple of cautions there. So that concludes the main remarks. I'm happy to answer any questions, and I appreciate everyone for listening today. So thank you.
Excellent. Dr. Szerwo, thank you so much for sharing this research, your expertise with us, and giving your time. So interesting to kind of gain some insight here. So a couple questions. I'm just going to start here at the beginning. And I know you just kind of talked a little bit about size too for different companies. Is there a specific size that a company is required to do DEI reporting?
So I forget the exact requirements for the federal government reporting. I don't remember those off the top of my head, but for the type of reporting I was talking about here, some of those reports that Deloitte was putting out or Starbucks, there's no requirements to put those out there. So again, we saw, what was it? I'll go back a little further. Right, so we see 28% of companies, again, these are Russell 1000 companies, big companies, aren't even putting this out there. So there's no requirement to do this. We're seeing companies facing increased pressure to do this from their customers, from society. You're sort of saying, hey, we'd really like to get this information. We'd like to know how you're performing on these different metrics, because we want to understand how you're contributing to the broader success of the community, for example. So there is this sort of external pressure from customers, from communities, maybe from customers or suppliers for this information, but it's not like you're not required to report this externally from like the federal government or the state government.
All right, excellent. Good to know there. This next question, and you just kind of talked about transparency towards the end of your formal presentation. So can you talk a little bit more about how leadership at companies or organizations can really gain trust from their employees to have the most accurate data reported, if it's self-reported, just so they feel comfortable that the data is being published in an accurate way?
Yeah, so how can management sort of gain the trust of the employees, making sure I'm sort of laying that out there. So how can management gain the trust of employees so the employees are reporting accurate information? So you know, it can go beyond just things like DEI reporting, like saying, hey, what's your race or gender, to maybe doing something a little bit deeper, to saying, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, how happy are you working with here? Something like that, where you would hopefully want you know, you want an accurate answer in both regards, but I think one's a little bit easier to assess than the other. So I think if you what I've seen a little bit of is if you are intentional in sort of what you're wanting to use the data for. So if you and open about that with your employees, saying things like, hey, we're going to collect this data because we want to improve. We want to not only improve operations, but, you know, we want to be a place where you like to work. We want to make sure that you're feeling fulfilled. So I think if you're open and honest with employees about saying, hey, you know, we want to get better as a company, right? We want to improve our operations, but as part of that, we also want to improve, you know, again, worker satisfaction. We want to drive down these turnover rates. And so we need to gain understanding of, you know, sort of what's motivating you, what you like about it here, what you don't like about it here. I think that is the best way to go with that. Again, sort of that open and honest and sincere, I think is the other way to say it, sincere approach to dealing with your employees and showing that they are part of the solution and they are an important important aspect of, I should say, of the company's overall success, and sort of treating them as such.
Fantastic. Yes, sincere and intentional. I like both of those words, Dr. Szerwo. It looks like those are the questions at this point in time, but I know we're getting close to the top of the hour as well. So I just also want to take a moment to thank everyone for joining us on behalf of the Office of Alumni Engagement, the UB School of Management. Thank you for giving us your time today. We are going to continue with our webinar series as well next week, so stay tuned for more information. Also, too, just as a reminder, this has been recorded, so you will receive a copy of this in the next 24 hours, so check your email for that. But I do, in the last couple minutes, also want to turn it back over to Brandon for any just closing remarks, resources that may be available to you, any advice you'd like to leave us, Dr. Szerwo, in these last minute or two.
Sure, I'd just say if you have any other questions, reach out to my email address there. I'd be happy to engage with you on this. I think this is a pretty exciting time for DEI reporting. We're obviously seeing it grow exponentially, and I think this is gonna, I truly do think this is gonna lead to better business performance, and I think it's gonna help overcome some societal challenges. So I think it's a win-win situation, and I'm excited that this is happening, basically. If you want to learn more about enterprise risk management, it's put out there by the Committee of Sponsoring Organizations. They're the same people, the same organization, I should say, that does the internal control reporting requirements, or how to do those. And you know, look at Starbucks. Starbucks is a really good example of what type of information you can put out there. Microsoft is another one. Microsoft has fantastic reporting quality across the board on generally what they're talking about: governance, financial reporting, DEI. Microsoft is another really good example if you're looking for some companies to sort of mirror yourself after, or to see what type of information is being collected, or what sort of reporting they're doing. That's another good resource. But anyways, again, I thank you all for listening, and I hope you enjoyed the webinar and got something out of it.
Excellent. Dr. Szerwo, I know I did, so I'm sure so many others did as well. Thank you again for your time. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for sharing all of this information. Again, so grateful for that. I hope everyone take care, stay well, enjoy the rest of your day, and go Bulls. Thanks again, Dr. Szerwo.